Hello, how are you guys doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to keep talking a little bit about Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. That is, of course, the bigger story, I think, in the news right now still because of last week's news. My two most recent videos obviously touched mostly on Breath of the Wild 2, and also on the topic that today's video is about, which is how the game might specifically relate to Nintendo's next generation console. Now, of course, a quick reminder that we are only theorizing and speculating and guessing about this whole topic today, which is what I do a lot on my channel, and I know that most of you guys know that, but I want to try to get ahead of the haters or the people who are uber sensitive to maybe this specific kind of topic. And it's fun to just guess and talk about what might be happening in the future, and it's not a negative thing or a diss or a slight against the Switch to potentially talk about whenever their next generation machine might be coming. And now, on my two most recent videos that did talk about Breath of the Wild 2 and the news of the delay to 2023, I briefly touched on how it could relate to their next generation machine and the launch if it happens next year. But I didn't go very deep down that rabbit hole because I didn't want to sideline those conversations too much. But like I mentioned, I did want to make a separate video where I spent a little bit more time talking about it now that we have something official about Breath of the Wild 2. And so, just for fun and the sake of conversation, that's what we're going to do today. Before we talk any more about Zelda and next generation Nintendo stuff, I like to remind you guys I'm always trying to grow the channel here at Rule of Two Review. I am less than 2,000 subscribers away from 20,000 subscribers, which I really hope to hit that goal this year. I upload every single week. I talk about all things Nintendo and all things gaming. So as you watch this video, if you seem to like what I'm doing and what you hear, then I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel. So as far as specifically the delay news, there's really not a whole lot more to say or add to that conversation. You know, I've exhausted it myself twice in two videos, including my first video, which was really solely about that fact that the game was delayed, and everyone else has talked about it to death. We know what happened. Last week, Nintendo announced that instead of releasing this year in the nebulous release window of 2022, they've decided to delay the game until spring 2023, which in theory, if we were to guess Breath of the Wild 2 would have launched around November, then in theory the delay could only be around, I don't know, 6-7 months or so, give or take. But that, of course, is if it actually sticks to spring of next year. Now, a lot of people have talked about why Nintendo would have chosen to do this. Some people think that Nintendo was trying to give the game a better shot at Game of the Year, insinuating that maybe Nintendo was like afraid of Elden Ring and its quality and its Game of the Year chances and all that stuff. Which to me, I just don't really believe. Not so much that Elden Ring isn't Game of the Year quality, because I think it is. In fact, I think it probably will be my Game of the Year. I freaking love the game. I've put in like 80 hours so far. And with Zelda slipping, I think the only other game that has a chance at being better, just for me and my tastes this year, would be God of War Ragnarok, if that game also sticks to this year. In fact, I might even give that game a slight edge, you know, before I play it, so it's tough to say. Either way, some people think that, you know, the fear of not winning Game of the Year is part of what incentivized Nintendo to delay Zelda until next year. Other people feel that the game just isn't ready and Nintendo's struggling to get it completed in time. The scope of the game is clearly bigger. They've showed us enough to let us know that they're changing a lot about the world of Hyrule, the sky aspect above, that new clip we saw of Link holding a broken Master Sword. I mean, all of this stuff is very exciting. And so some people are just taking Nintendo at their word that the game needs more time. The other conversation is, again, the topic of this video. If Nintendo is actually planning on releasing new upgraded hardware or next-gen hardware next year in 2023, which is what I have been predicting since 2020, then maybe some people think that Nintendo is making a point to line up the next Zelda to be a launch title or a cross-gen title with the next-gen Switch. And I'm serious when I say that people were talking and thinking this way, because the very day, within hours of the announcement of Breath of the Wild 2's delay to 2023, Switch 2 was trending on Twitter. Of course, this made me extremely happy because, like I just mentioned, I've been talking about the Switch 2 or a next-gen Switch of some kind going back to 2020. And I've specifically targeted 2 release years of either 2022 or 23, right? That's the difference between, I think, my predictions I've been saying for 2 years and other people who've just been saying, oh yeah, Nintendo's making a next-gen Switch, and so I'm great for predicting that. But it's like, if you just say they're working on it, to me that doesn't really count, because every company's always working on the next big thing, and we know Nintendo is as well. So if you say it without filtering it down to a specific window, then your guess or prediction or whatever, to me, doesn't really hold much weight. I've targeted 2 specific years, so if Nintendo actually releases it by the end of 2023, then that means my prediction was correct. If they wait until 2024 or later, then that means my prediction will have been wrong. Like, my prediction has a very clearly defined line of when I can be considered right or when I can be considered wrong. And once Zelda got that delay and everyone else started talking about it, it's like, yes, finally, it took the delay of a huge game, but finally we're seeing people kind of jump on board with my thinking that maybe next year is the time Nintendo will finally release a new piece of Switch hardware. And more than new piece of Switch hardware, it's next-gen piece of Switch hardware. This is also something I've been saying for a while, which is whether it's an upgraded Switch, but that happens to be next-gen and powerful enough to play exclusive games, or if it's something that they call Switch 2 or Switch Plus, or even something else that isn't a Switch, but is still powerful enough to compete a little bit in the power arena of PS5 and Series X, that's the general thing that I personally have been talking about, like I said, going back to 2020. So I don't want to make this just as much about what I've specifically been saying. I just want to talk about the situation at hand, which has to do with Zelda getting that delay, and so many of us, myself and many of you guys out there as well, thinking that maybe being the optimal word, okay? A guess isn't a fact, it's literally just a guess. So myself and the other people who are now guessing and predicting this, that maybe delaying Zelda till next year is a sign that Nintendo's already preparing us for the release or the announcement of their next-gen machine. It's very exciting. I want to believe that's true. For me, it's a little bit different because, as I just spent a couple of minutes talking to you guys about, I've already been thinking that this was going to happen. I didn't need the delay of Zelda to next year to make me think that. I already was on board with that. I've been putting my chips on 2022 or 23 for a while now. I even talked about it in a video a couple of weeks ago. But I do like seeing that the delay of this game makes other people think that it could be possible. And so for me, this just means that Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 finds itself in the same position that I also see Metroid Prime 4 in. And this is very similar to my most recent video, but to kind of double down on this point, I think there's a great chance that one or both of those games, probably Zelda Breath of the Wild most likely, will be releasing around the launch of the next Switch, and will probably be cross-gen. Remember, Nintendo has already done that twice, specifically with the Zelda franchise. Both Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild got cross-gen releases to help launch and propel their brand new hardware at those respective times. Now with Twilight Princess, it's obviously a little bit different because that released on the Wii first, and then released on the then last-gen GameCube several months later. Whereas Breath of the Wild released on both the Wii U and the Switch on the exact same day. But still, they're similar enough to show us that there's a pattern here. Nintendo is willing to allow Zelda to be their cross-gen console to take both advantage of the install base of the old generation and help propel their new generation forward. And it worked fantastically, spectacularly well both times. Look at the massive success of the Wii, look at the massive success of the Switch. Both of them launched with a cross-generation Zelda game. I mean, how can we not see Breath of the Wild 2 as potentially in the same situation? I think there's a great chance that that ends up happening. Even if Breath of the Wild 2, per my prediction, gets delayed one more time past spring next year and instead lands in holiday next year. My ultimate prediction here is holiday 2023, which is about 18 to 20 months from now. I think we could be seeing the next-gen Nintendo console and Breath of the Wild 2 launching at the exact same time. And now, yes, I think Metroid Prime 4 will also be getting similar treatment, but as the days are going on since the delay of Zelda, I'm starting to feel like maybe Metroid Prime 4 might be better served as the second big title to release, also cross-gen along with Breath of the Wild 2, for the next-gen console, maybe in like early 2024. So just, you know, just a guy on YouTube and on the internet spitballing and riffing as a fan, just guessing. So maybe next-gen Nintendo console and Breath of the Wild 2 release, maybe holiday next year, which means one more delay for Breath of the Wild. And obviously Breath of the Wild would be cross-gen for both the Switch and the Switch 2, or whatever that thing is. And then maybe 4 or 5 months later, in early 2024, we get the Metroid Prime 4 launch. You know, some of those things might shift around a little bit, but just, you know, kind of general, vague, surface-level guessing, I feel like there's a chance that that's how things line out. Either way, I don't want to get sidetracked on the Metroid thing because it's easy for me to do, you guys know. Keeping this focused on Zelda, I just think that there's a great chance that the delay is a sign Nintendo might try to line these things up a little bit. Maybe they don't. Maybe Nintendo releases Breath of the Wild 2 in spring like they're saying, and either their next-gen console also releases in spring, which I don't really think will happen, or they do release their next-gen console holiday next year, and maybe they just release Breath of the Wild 2 in spring and then release a definitive next-gen version later alongside of the next-gen Switch. Or maybe I end up being wrong and the next-gen Switch isn't coming out next year. I mean, that could happen. Hell, maybe Breath of the Wild 2 gets delayed to 2024 as well. I mean, all of these options are on the table, but I've just kind of given you guys a glimpse into what I think are some of the more likely scenarios. That being Zelda delayed again, Zelda next-gen Switch, launch holiday next year, maybe Prime 4 follows, both of those games being cross-gen. These are kind of the bigger swings that I'm taking with my personal predictions. And so, only time will tell, but like I said at the beginning of this video, man, it's just fun to speculate about this stuff. I know that a lot of people out there take things really seriously. Sometimes they take things personally. And I know that this might even be the third video in a row that I've had to kind of talk about it, but there's something about the delay of Zelda, the conversation around it, the fact that it does kind of by default bring in a next-gen Switch conversation along with it, is the kind of thing that gets a certain kind of person and fan on the internet riled up in a certain way. Not necessarily like in the shittiest way. It's not like it's the most mean kind of things, but I guess you just kind of have to be in a position like mine where you're a YouTuber, a Nintendo YouTuber, an internet personality. As small time as I am, and I am very small time, I still have sizable enough of an audience and sizable enough of a reach, if you want to call it, both on Twitter and on YouTube, that I am on the receiving end of a lot of people's conversations. And a lot of times it's a lot of people's emotions about things. You know, we all get emotional about and passionate about the things we care about, right? So if you're not a YouTuber or an internet personality and you're just someone out there just watching and commenting and tweeting about things, you don't see things the way someone in my position does. And I'm telling you, the reason I've had to talk about this in all three of these last videos is simply because there's something weird about being on the receiving end of people's most passionate opinions, and when they don't agree with you, or what you say doesn't line up with what they want to happen or believe will happen, they're going to let you know about it. Sometimes it's just fine, fun, harmless conversation between fans. Sometimes it's a little bit more extreme than that. And so I'm just trying to kind of get ahead of the conversation a little bit when I put these addendums in these videos. So hopefully that makes sense to you. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse. It's just the nature of being a YouTuber on the internet, I guess. So either way, that's what I have to say about this. The next-gen Switch thing, the Zelda thing. It's very interesting. It's fun times, man. I'm very excited about how things are playing out. Yes, I'm disappointed Zelda got delayed, but it brings, at least for me, it brings along with it other exciting conversation and possibilities, if that makes sense to you guys. So these are my opinions and thoughts and predictions. What do you guys think? Talk about it below. And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of BotW. I will catch you next time on another video. Bye-bye.